Everyone, happy to see you all. We're going to go ahead and do a deep dive today into OmniStudio. I'm Tina Woodall, and Kathy, I don't see her online. She is, poor Kathy, she has joined the Road Warriors old days. We're basically flying out on Monday to Thursday, and she is probably in the airport right now. And so between the two of us, we are the co-leaders for the healthcare user group, basically how we're solving healthcare problems using Salesforce. Fun fact about me, I love to plant flowers to distract me from the weeds in the vegetable garden. I am in Florida, Central Florida right now. It is brutally hot outside. So how do I ignore the weeds in my vegetable garden? I make sure there's flowers. So I just see the flowers and I don't see the weeds. So fun fact about myself. We have a guest. Riley, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yes. Hello, everyone. I'm Riley Hawkins. Kind of what it says there, I've been in the implementation world for about 5 years, just over 5 years, and I joined Salesforce a couple years ago. So 2020 is actually kind of a COVID shift. So love what I do. Still learning. Obviously, there's plenty to learn. Fun fact, as seen there, I went to Thailand a couple summers ago, and one of the things we did was go to an elephant sanctuary. So got to walk around with some elephants, pet one, fed one. Fun fact, elephants have hair, but it's not soft. It's like really stiff. It's kind of weird, but it was a very cool experience.
Course, right? Wiring course.
Yes, that is the word. Yes.
Awesome. And Riley and I know each other from working together at Ascension, and I've always admired and respected him and his skills, and so happy to have him as a guest today. All right, today we're doing an overview of OmniStudio really quickly. We're not getting into the weeds in a training perspective. There is another healthcare user group meeting on OmniStudio, so it's going to be, we're just going to fly on through it, and then we will go into Salesforce org, and then Riley will give you a lot more deeper dive into it, of explaining it, but not necessarily training on it. And we'll talk about training resources near the end. Some updates from OmniStudio, ScreenFlow versus OmniScript, healthcare use cases, OmniStudio industry focus. This is for the Health Cloud, Provider Network Management, and the certifications, consultant and developer, and resources. So we're going to dive into that. All right. If some of these slides look familiar to you, I shamelessly copied and pasted from all over the internet, but I do call out where I give credit and I call out where they came from. So this is some of the Salesforce slides that are floating out in the ether. But a quick overview of OmniStudio, it's basically building that personalized, fully branded, guided consumer forms, easily with drag and drop configuration. It is brilliant for being able to configure an excellent interaction for external personas. And they're using OmniScript, Flex cards, data raptors, and integration procedures for that. This is another view of that. Even though this is a whole package and different items, they look for OmniStudio. We just want to focus on the OmniScript part of that. Is basically allowing you to create your guided interactions, and it's way beyond what Flow does, and it gives you very guided interactions of very complex business use cases. Cards is also called Flex cards. This is your ability to create essentially Lightning Web components without the code. Data Raptor, and I am so sorry, I'm looking for, my screen just went a little wonky, so give me 1 second. There we go. So the Data Raptor is more, think of it as, that's a good way of saying it.
It's typically, sorry, Tina, it's typically, I guess the best way to think about it, if you're familiar with flows, is all of your DML stuff. So basically create, update, delete, querying Salesforce. Data Raptors are for Salesforce data. And then they have other functionality outside of Data Raptors to get data from other sources, whether that's an API, kind of other places. But Data Raptor is basically how to get and work with Salesforce data.
Thank you. That's where I was looking for my summary, because I'm like, there was a word I'm looking for. And just keep in mind, it's your Salesforce data. So that's where you want to think of it. It's just your Salesforce data, where your integration procedures, think of it similar to like auto launch flows, and it's usually a data source for your Flex cards. Anything else you want to add to that,
Riley? Nothing there. Integration procedures are super crazy, but we can wait. Yeah, we can hold off. I
don't even know if we're gonna have time to actually go down there, and it's not a training exercise, but we're gonna focus on the the Health Cloud and Provider Network Management, OmniStudios, which will give you a deeper view into OmniStudio overall. So this is a different way of looking at this. So when you're looking at the Flex cards and OmniScript and industry Lightning Web Components, think of it as client side, the digital experience, and service management is the server side. So you have data wrapper, integration procedures, and so forth. So this is a really good way of conceptualizing this and how you break it up. Another thing too is here, when you're looking at on the scale, OmniScripts is in basically OmniStudio is getting you just to that line of where code is, right? It's just taking you right to that line and maybe a little toe touch right into code, but not deeply. And that's why there's the advocating that this could still be in the admin world. So where we have is page layouts, dynamic forms, screen flows, OmniScripts is right before Lightning Web Components, which is very much pro code. So this is where you want to think of this and overall. Source for this diagram, if you go to Medium and you follow this author, he does a lot of Salesforce Architect, and of course I stole that from Salesforce Bin. Another item I stole for Salesforce Bin, and why do you care, and why do we keep on bringing up OmniStudio, especially in the healthcare user group? I keep on bringing it up because it's in all of the industries. It's included. If you get one Health Cloud license, you get one OmniStudio license. Period. End of story. You don't have to pay anything extra for it. It's there to not be looking at exploring and really utilizing OmniStudio in your solutioning. It doesn't make sense. You're already paying for it in the license structure. And I think it's really important for those of us who work in the industries to really, really become familiar with this and understand it and utilize that and know when it makes sense to do it. Because especially if the flow doesn't get you there because it's not handling that complex business use cases. But what if you don't have industry and you still want OmniStudio? There is a thing called Salesforce Einstein Automated. It came out a while back and it says, oh, we have all these things like Salesforce Flow. Oh, every single Salesforce org has Salesforce Flow, but they try to bundle it and sell it. They have Flow, Einstein bots, but here's where you can get OmniStudio outside of industry. So if you want to go get OmniStudio, you don't have industry cloud, Einstein Automate is where you can go pick it up. It also has MuleSoft, RPA, Einstein Recommendation Builder, and Einstein Next Best Action. Couple updates if you are familiar with OmniStudio that just came out. They're having a huge push to going away from a managed package into standard, bringing it into core standard, which also optimizes the product, helps reduce response time and so forth. As well as they have streamlined their licensing changes and how you set it up. They basically want one license, whether you're an admin or not, then you go to permission sets. And then their entitlement changes. What the heck does this mean? If you're not familiar with OmniStudio, OmniStudio says, hey, you have one Health Cloud license, we give you one OmniStudio license. Nice. Where they're giving the extra money, though, is how many times you're basically calling on volume. They've simplified it, really reduced it. One OmniStudio call to one OmniScript was started. They've really simplified it, right? So as you can see, before they're like, every single one. It's like, no, they've simplified this process. But you do have to keep an eye on this, just like you do in Experience Cloud, right? You need to look at your volumes and see what's happening in there. ScreenFlow versus OmniScript, good old Salesforce Bin. They got some good information on Salesforce Bin for basic OmniStudio information, but really when we're looking at comparison, the closest you're going to get is ScreenFlow and OmniScript, and actually Riley and I are going back and forth. This is pretty much the only thing you're going to do comparison on Flow, anything Omni, it's going to be OmniScript. Everything else is oranges and apples, and it's just simply saying, what do you want to consider? But even so, I would say this is not even that accurate in the aspect of your audience. They said ScreenFlow for internal, OmniScript is external. I would argue if you have a complex contact center script, OmniStudio is what you would use. And some of the OmniStudios that you see in Health Cloud are for internal people to use. It's not external facing at all. So take this with a grain of salt as well. Simple versus complex, process type generic versus industry specific, maybe yes or no. Branding requirements, relaxed, strict. You can get really refined in your UI and how it looks and branding in OmniStudio. Transaction value, low to high, and external data. What would you think? What else would you throw on this one, Riley?
No, I think your first point was probably the biggest, is it's not a clear-cut decision point, right? So I know even at Ascension, right, there were times where we were getting pretty complex with screen flows and kind of hitting the limit. The other thing that is pretty cool that we might see, might not, there's a lot of stuff as we get into what OmniScripts look like and what you can do with them. I think there's a lot of things there that flows are slowly incorporating. So I think a big example of this, at least within the last, maybe the last release or two, reactive screens. So
Right. Yeah.
in flows, traditionally in screen flows, you had to click next and execute some action before you would see kind of what happened. I think screen flows are getting there. OmniScript, a lot of that stuff is out of the box. So it's super cool in that regard. Even if you have a business requirement, yes, maybe it's an internal audience, but maybe I want to show, I'm trying to think of an example right now. A perfect one is, hey, someone's registering and they have to be over the age of 18. If they enter their birth date and it's under 18, right, you can immediately spit something out on that screen at that moment in time that says, hey, you have to be 18 to register, you can't move forward, right? So there's things like that that maybe don't necessarily fit into a lot of these compare and contrast categories. It ultimately depends, but the way it's marketed, it is more complex than screen flows, I would argue. So you typically want to justify the, how long is it going to take to build out and define all these requirements before moving forward with using it.
Good call outs. All right, so we are a healthcare user group. It is about a deeper dive into OmniStudio from the healthcare perspective. When we're looking at OmniStudio, they have her Health Cloud as well as the Provider Network Management, which is an add-on module. It's additional cost or additional SKU for Health Cloud. They being Salesforce, does provide OmniStudio, your scripts, your flex cards, and so forth for both of these. Keep in mind, though, if you're not familiar with the healthcare world, anything payer insurance, it's actually payer like health insurance, not like car insurance and so forth, and that's under Financial Cloud. Just want to call that out in case you're not familiar with this world. So with Health Cloud, I got to tell you guys, I was a little tired and I was starting to put slides together, and I went to Google Bard. So the source for this one is Google Bard. And I said, hey, tell me, what does Health Cloud OmniStudio have? And these are a couple of them. One is appointment self-service, basically allowing patients to book and reschedule appointments. And that is a hard lift, by the way. It's a very, very hard lift. It has nothing to do with OmniStudio. It has to be able to do having the scheduling information in your Salesforce Health Cloud. That's a huge lift. Patient portal, and allowing basically your experience cloud to have your patients be able to access their information. Candidly, in a healthcare environment, unless it's a small firm, the patient portal is already tied to an EHR. I don't see many use cases for this unless it's a very, very small firm, then that would make sense. But most everyone's got their own patient portals through their EHRs, but it could be used that way. Provider portal, totally on spot for a provider portal, not only having a portal experience site where providers could go and apply, and that's one of our items we're going to show you, but they can go apply. And then when they need to update their information or they want to look up an existing claim or something like that, you can integrate the claim system and then have it visible for the provider through the portal. And clinical decision support. And this one that has the EHR components of this. So it could be that you are having some EHR integrations with that. That's going to be much more larger enterprise, whether it's a payer or provider for that. And then care management. This is when you're having case management, you're working with patients. Think also from a payer. It could be a payer or provider working with a high-risk population and wanting to interact with them. For provider network management, it's all about the provider. This is the onboarding, credentialing, performance management, communication, and again, that generic portal that I was just talking about. And what the heck does that look like? Let's get away from the slide decks and let's get into OmniScript. So keep in mind, this is my demo org. You guys have seen it before, so this is not real data. I'm not being PII, PHI, HIPAA, non-going rogue or anything like that. This is a demo org. So when you install, if you have an existing health cloud, you will have to go in and update with a managed package until you migrate over to standard. So if you already have it existing, you have it in there and you want to go play with it, you're going to have to go in there and actually update the package to the most recent release and then do a couple of tweaks to be able to see everything the way it should be seen. And then you'll have an OmniStudio app, and then you'll basically have your scripts, flex cards, Raptors, integration. Riley, I couldn't find anything. What the heck is an Omni UI card?
Couldn't tell you. Don't even have it in my org. So unfortunately, I'm not helpful there. Um,
That tells us how much, literally there's nothing underneath it. I wonder if it's like a relic. They all thought, oh, we'll have an Omni UI card. And this demo org is about 2 years old. So maybe it's a relic. Okay, fine. So these are the ones you're going to have it. And so when you're looking at this is what's coming with your Health Cloud or Provider Network Management. It's really easy to tell the Provider Network Management ones because it's P and M. So that fast 5 times. So when you're looking at this and you're coming in to look at your scripts, this is what you have available to you. I feel like I'm frozen. So am I frozen or not frozen?
No, you're good. It just
I was
takes
just
it's
looking for
opening in
more.
another. It just opened in another tab. It looks like.
No, I know, but I was just thinking there's actually, or maybe I'm getting confused with my flex cards because I know there's like a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, it's my flex cards because I was like, I know one of these is like at the never ending screen, it goes on and on. So this is how many scripts they have out of the box for you. So best practice, clone it and then hack it to your heart's content. Okay, I was thinking of the flex cards. So that's the screen that goes on and on, my friends.
Yes.
But best practice, right? You want to go ahead and clone it, and then you can go through and make all the changes you want to that. Now we do have 2 open for you. One is being the UM. So like if you're looking to do UM, utilization management, they're the ones who basically a provider or you as a member basically wants authorization to provide this procedure, right? So they basically say, sure, we'll pay you $100 to do knee surgery. And they negotiate the rate, or they can deny it saying, look, their knee's perfectly fine. Why are you doing knee surgery? Utilization management's that, for those of you who are not familiar with that. So this is saying, hey, we have a UM auth, and then we have, this is a flex card. So this is your Lightning Web component, right? And then this is the script that goes with that. And from that part, another one to show you is this is the Provider Network Management Provider Application Flex Card, which I can do a preview of that. And then I will show you what the script looks like, and Riley's going to step us through the script. And this is slow.
Yeah, it's so, and Tina, one thing to add into that. So I think you touched on it. Flex cards, think of those as kind of a drag and drop Lightning Web component. It's literally how I think of them, which is super helpful. So you can start looking at, this is where a lot of the branding comes into play. You can pretty much any component that you put on here, you can, put custom CSS to, custom styling, but it also allows for drag and drop capabilities for all of that. The other thing to note is Tina's going from FlexCard to OmniScript, FlexCard to OmniScript. So FlexCards are really used for display, right? So they can display information. You can't really take action on anything though. It's so like a screen flow you can enter data directly into. Think of a FlexCard as, okay, I have information in front of me, similar to like a dashboard. If I want to do something to that data, you would have an OmniScript that lives in the background that you launch through a button or something like that, right? So the start credentialing, you click that, that would launch an OmniScript for you to take action on that. So that just a call out there.
Nope, that's great. And for whatever reason, it didn't want to come up, and what it looks like, this is a good idea of what it looks like. I was trying to go into preview mode and didn't want to launch, probably because I did not have the context one, and that's fine. So let's go to the one that we were prepping. Here is our provider recruitment. So let me set the stage, and then Riley, you can talk us through that. So our company here has a provider portal, and a provider company went to the provider portal and filled out a application because they want to be a provider for the members or the patients, right? And so that came into Salesforce as a lead. And now we have this provider recruitment that's pulling up, identified a lead that's in this org and pulled up this person. And this is in preview mode. It's not design mode. So when they, Riley, do you want me to just go through the preview mode and then we flip
I would
over to
say
design,
start with, I'd say probably, yeah, we can do the preview mode first. That's fine. We'll kind of bounce back and forth.
I'm only asking because it takes forever to refresh. That's why I'm asking.
Flipping back and forth between design and preview should be okay.
Okay.
It's only when
So
you.
where do you want me to go?
So let's just, I guess, let's talk about the layout of this first, right?
Okay.
So in the preview mode, basically what you're doing, again, comparing to flows, is think of like your debug flow, right? Your debug mode. So the left half, you have your OmniScript that you're debugging. Right above it, there's the context ID, device, theme, language. There's some things that you can change, right? On the right side, you have pretty much your debugging logs. Think of it like that, right? So screen flows, they walk you through step by step at, this screen or this action. This is the data that you have available to you. On the right side, you have that with your data JSON tab and your action debugger. That's pretty much it from a debugging standpoint. This is where you're going to live a lot of the time. And then on the design tab, so Tina, we can flip over there really quick, and then we can walk through an actual demo. So the design tab is really where you're going to build it. This, I think, is similar to screen flows in a sense. So your middle section, that's where you drag and drop your kind of step-by-step. It goes from top to bottom. This is what you want to do. On the right side, where those things are collapsed, that's everything that you can do with an OmniScript. So Tina, if you open, for example, display or action, let's do display. I think that's going to be a little bit more relevant. So display, line break, text block, right? So there's some components that you can put on a step. And then inputs is probably another good one. Inputs have anything that a person can enter, right? So any sort of field that you want to capture information for, you can do pretty much anything you can think of. File uploads, emails, you can look up to Salesforce data. Similar to in Salesforce, you have your input, can't think of the word, components, I guess, that you can put on a screen. So that's kind of what the build mode looks like. And then, you build some stuff out, you go back to your preview mode, you preview it to make sure it's working, and away you go. So that's a quick overview. So Tina, if you want to go back to the preview, we can kind of talk about maybe what's happening step by step. So the first screen here, basically all it did in the background is queried some data from Salesforce based on, Tina, if you can hover over that context ID really quick. So the context ID is OmniStudio, OmniScript's way of saying record ID effectively. So the OmniScript runs in the context of a record in Salesforce. So that's, think of like in a flow, you have the record ID that's I guess a predetermined value that Salesforce kind of holds for flows. No different. So basically all that happened here is Salesforce, we went out and grabbed Janice from Salesforce and loaded, I don't know why I messed that up, loaded that data into this OmniScript, which you'll see more on the next screen. So one more cool thing to call out on OmniScripts as well, the steps on the right. So that is, I know, something that flows traditionally. There's packages that you can install to do that. It is out of the box. You can see a progress indicator in OmniScript. So that's another, it kind of seems like a small thing, but it's huge from a user experience perspective. They can see exactly where they are in the process.
Very cool. So basically, once my screen actually decides, oh, can we do this again? There we go.
There we go.
So this pre-populating off the information that received when the provider was at the portal. I have no clue who that person is, but don't call them. So there's network details and a specialty role, and they would go through the process. By the way, the audience for this, when we were just talking about, they're saying in the documentation, oh, it's external. No. The person who's here calling, they're actually the company. The lead came in, the provider's interested in providing services. This is the contact person inside the company going through, it's going to be a complex process, and it's going to be pulling forward their information, and I'm going to make up stuff. Now, really cool thing is actually, if you did have an integration that, if you had an integration, then you could call out to CIQH. I just entered in a number. Why did you not like it? Okay. You could have integration. CAQH is a provider data warehouse. I guess you could say it's a clearinghouse. And then this has been populated. You can fill it all out, and you go through the whole process. And you can add a lot more fields to this using the OmniStudio. What's required for you? And there's actually, I've seen some. There's even more in the provider network management that this will tie to, and actually keep on going deeper and deeper and deeper.
Also, this is a great point. I know it looks like it failed here. Another huge benefit to OmniScripts, something that I think flows, again, they have packages that you can install. OmniScripts have what are called type aheads. So example, shipping address. So basically what this is doing on the fly is I'm assuming it's not right now, but you would typically connect to some external source of data to verify this as you're typing, right? So it could be something like searching for an existing person in your Salesforce or an existing record, or it can be something more complex like searching for a shipping address, connecting to Google Maps, right? And it'll give you a drop down of, so super cool. Like I said, ScreenFlows have it, but I think typically that's going to be either a custom built Lightning Web component that you drop onto a screen, or it's going to be an installed package from a third party. So super helpful.
Very cool. And then you're going to get their confirmation because they're testing this as information, you're confirming it, and then you go through and submit. So that's the preview of, excuse me, basically it was a demo, so it's going to be pissy at me. Yep. So with that, you want me to go back to design?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So Tina, did you have more you were going to add on there? Right.
No.
Okay. So walking through, basically we just walked through the kind of what the end user would experience. We're not going to dive into all of this stuff, but if we walk through and open up some of these nodes, if you want to call them that, they should look familiar. So a screen in a Salesforce flow is a step in an OmniScript. So Tina, that second node there where it says portal user exists, we're going to see kind of that standard stuff, that first screen effectively that Tina looked at. And then if you go down to provider recruitment, the fourth one, if you go ahead and open that up. So it might look messy here. All of the orange is conditional visibility. But another cool thing about OmniScript is, I guess, a huge capability of it is multilingual. So basically what you can do is after a typical process is you build out your OmniScript and then you turn everything into labels in Salesforce. And then you can add the translations directly into there. And that OmniScript is now multilingual. It just kind of pulls in depending on what language you're in. It will pull all of that in. So it's a little bit messy to look at here. But as we go down, you see the screen step is where you can drag and drop stuff onto. You can set up conditional visibility, pretty much anything that you want a user to interact with. And then between them, there's going to be other actions going on, whether that's creating, reading, deleting, updating Salesforce data, whether that's reaching out to a third party. So they can get pretty complex, but they're super, super powerful. This is just tough to look at.
I was going to say that this is not fun to look at. And actually, I would say that a lot of people are going to be really intimidated to try it and to get into this because this is becoming more, yes, I know this is a standard label. Where it's doing this, can you connect me? And you can look at that from a flow perspective. But in some ways, I don't know, people are just going to have to, well, I'm being articulate tonight, not. Basically, this is something to be embraced and get comfortable with, even though it is messy to look at because of the power of what it provides without you actually having to write code.
Yep. And I will say that's not, it depends on, obviously, these are all templates. It is very beneficial, and we'll talk about it a bit later. You can go request a dev org with OmniStudio installed, and you can just start with a completely blank slate, and you can call things whatever you want, right? So on the right side, for example, Tina, you're clicked into a radio button, right? That first radio button. So the name on the right, if we just look at that panel really quick, here's all of your configuration options, basically. So the name is kind of the API name. It's if you ever have to reference that field, you're going to use the name, and then you can enter a label, right? So instead of using a standard label, you can type whatever you want it to say. You can make it required. There's some different display modes. You can add all of the options. So really, once you click into a component, on the right is where you configure all of that stuff. So it might be tough to look at for templates because this is obviously all Salesforce built, but it is very fun. I can't believe I'm using that word sometimes. To just start with something blank and go build something, whether that's as simple as capturing, asking a user for their information and creating a record in Salesforce. It's super fun to get into some of this stuff.
That's a good point. But to me, and please anyone else jump in here, I always found looking at a blank page more intimidating. And when I did websites, and I told you that I can hack a code. I can read code, I can hack code. Don't ask me to write it from scratch. So this is where another way of reversing that is go into your go into your, I am not speaking well today. Go to your health cloud org, clone existing OmniStudio scripts and flex cards, and then hack it to death. That's another way of doing it too. If I delete this, what happens? So whether from your point, you love that blank screen, you love the unlimited possibilities. I'm like, let me see what I can do to break this. But good calls. Anybody have any questions at this point? I don't see anything in the chat. Any thoughts or questions? Has anyone here played with this yet? No?
I
right.
have a question about when you were Tina, when you were filling out one of like the ID numbers or phone or numbers on
The context?
earlier screen, yeah, there was like an underline on the field area. Is that like an OmniStudio kind of feature where like, hey, it has to be this minimum number to be valid, like a validation sort of thing?
That was a validation rule on the field itself.
Yeah.
So CAQH and NPI have specific, So wherever the heck that was.
You're gonna have to go forward a couple screens. But yes, so something else, you can add explicit validations on fields. The underline, you can also have kind of pre-populated expected, for example, a phone number, right? You would have some display text to kind of show this is the format we're expecting. My guess is that's probably what happened with the underline as well.
Yeah, this one right here.
Yeah. Yep, so when a user clicks in, you can kind of default, I want to display some text. I don't personally know if I would put an underline. I think that doesn't give a whole lot of benefit, but yeah, you can add individual validations. Another cool thing that I don't know if Tina touched on, especially for NPI, it's probably not set up here, but you can also do call outs on the fly if you need to verify that against some source of data, right? To make sure that's a unique identifier, make sure it's valid. You don't have to necessarily wait to validate some of that information.
Yeah, they don't do the NPI typically because NPES, where that comes from, is usually lagging. CAQH is where you can do that. And there's actually part of their demo, Salesforce has a relationship with CAQH, and so they usually will demo the pull from CAQH. And I don't know if you guys caught that when I went to go move forward, there's a validation in here already built. And that's another nice thing too. In your demo organ, keep in mind that this went ahead and it was quickly like, well, you can't move forward. There's that email already existed. So it was giving me, it was like, yeah, you couldn't. It gave me an error message. So I had to modify the email, the fake email one way. Any other questions?
Melissa. So I don't know, just answering a question from the chat, I don't know if you can create a developer org with OmniStudio. You might be able to. You definitely can request them. I think I have one. I don't know if, I think it's your typical, they'll give it to you, and then if you don't log in after X amount of days, they'll send you an email saying they're going to.
You can do that with your Trailhead. When we get to the point where you do your,
does.
Yeah, Trailhead gives you a sandbox to do with OmniStudio to do that, and then can't you just
kind of, unless I looked at a different Trailhead, kind of, if you get started, and we can look at it later with the get started with OmniStudio, it actually has a specific template org that it asks you to request. You don't just set up a playground through Trailhead. You actually have to request a specific type of org.
Really? No.
Yeah. And I don't know if that's more so due to OmniStudio or something else, but it's not like you can just go into Trailhead, create a new blank playground, and then install something. It might have something to do with licensing. I'm not sure, but it does call out. There are some infographics about, and I can probably pull one up on the side and go find it. But it does ask you to reach out and request a specific org.
So, thank you, Ryan. And then this one, you can spin up, that'd be pretty cool. Check out that one. You can also spin up a 30-day org. And then if you're a consultant, you can get it extended. And this is the one Ryan just dropped in. Ooh, that looks good too.
Hey, Tina, this is Gerald. I know that there's an OmniStudio like super badge, in which case it has you, it gives you the link to request that special org. And then it has OmniStudio installed. It has all the licenses, etc.
Nice.
Yeah, and I just found a heads up with kind of the first Trailhead for OmniStudio. If you want to do hands-on practice, there are links to. It's basically they call it a special developer org that contains OmniStudio and sample data. So just a heads up, it's a little bit. There are some other steps you have to do when setting them up. But yeah, I don't know if there's a way to just endlessly kind of create them on your own. I think you typically have to request to get one spun up for you.
Yeah, try either like the Health Cloud demo org, but something else, we're getting off topic a little bit, but I've noticed lately on the demo orgs, they locked it down that you can't go into setup. I was like, that's interesting. Yeah, they're now trying to say this is your demo org and you shall not do anything to it. I'm like, okay. So you have to be careful some of those resources. If you're a consultant, you can go into the partner community and go through the partner learning camp and get some orgs that way. There's a couple of ways you can still get these orgs and request them. So you just may have to get creative and then try again. Thank you, Ryan, for that. And Gerald, yes, that's a good call out. So all right, we still want to go through what else Riley has. Are you guys having any questions on that? We want to make sure we leave 10 minutes to discuss certification since Riley is certified in both. Any tips and tricks we can get on that? Is there anything, any other questions before Riley continues on this part? No? All right, Riley, where are we going next?
I think we're good with a demo.
Okay.
A lot of it is, again, going to be just getting in here and, especially when it comes to certifications and practice, getting in and just messing around with a lot of this. Salesforce does a good job of giving you sample use cases to walk through and kind of step-by-step how to build them and explains what you're doing and why you're doing it. But as we'll talk about later, it is limited from finding resources out there on how to do things within OmniStudio. So I think we're good with the demo.
Okay. Let me just then recap this real quick. So get your hands, if you don't have Health Cloud or if you don't have an Industry Cloud, you want to go in and look. Well, if you do have it, let me rephrase that. If you do have it, you really want to go in there and see what you have, what is provided. And all of the industry clouds have their own specific ones. So you definitely want to look at the scripts. You want to look at the flex cards. You want to take copy them, play with them, and know that they're all through there. And that the reasons for doing this is because it's becoming more and more pervasive for having this. So I highly recommend you go that route. All right, so back to our slideshow and the certifications, because everyone knows we're all about the certifications. So Riley, this is all you.
Yeah, no, so there are 2 certifications available for OmniStudio right now. There is a developer and there is a consultant. So I got these relatively recently, I think 2 months ago, I got both of them. Slightly different flavors of the content in them. I will say there is quite a bit of overlap. So if you are interested in pursuing these certifications, I recommend getting, probably depending on which one you feel stronger with, either developer or consultant, and we'll kind of go over the difference between them. Recommend trying to take both of them back to back if you feel comfortable. because there is quite a bit of overlap, not necessarily in the questions themselves, but just the content that they're around. So we have the OmniStudio developer slide up. Really, the best way to think about this is more of a, how do you configure XYZ within OmniStudio? So a couple of those bullet points, again, is talking about integration procedures, flex cards, data raptors, all of those OmniStudio specific components. There are some other points that you have to know. We didn't talk about it earlier without getting too big into the weeds. OmniStudio is really built with JSON. So all of the data that you're interacting with, you're saving, you're modifying, you're getting from other services, other APIs, that's all using JSON. So if you're not familiar with JSON, I recommend brushing up on that as well, which is just a standard data organization structure. And that's kind of the developer exam. So there are, from a kind of exam structure, again, 120 minutes long, 60 multiple choice questions. The passing score is a little high. I think it's higher than some other certifications, at least I've taken in the past. But the OmniStudio developer is really focused around, how do you set something up? How do you configure something? For example, what data raptor would you want to use to extract data from a single Salesforce object, right? So it's not so much the conceptual business problem use case, it's more the explicit technical, how do you do this within OmniStudio? Personally, I found this easier, which we'll talk about in a second. Tina, if you want to go to the consultant.
Hold on a second. Gerald, you have a question?
Sorry, is there a
No,
question?
you're good. There's a hand up. Mhm.
Oh.
Yeah, Riley, I
Mhm.
was told, I don't remember by who, telling me that if you're not a developer, don't get so anxious about going after OmniStudio developer, because a lot of the elements are self-created, and then you're going in later and doing modifications. For example, I'm not really strong on HTML, but I can look at an HTML page, copy it, and then modify the table so it has more stuff. And they said that the OmniStudio developers right along that. Would you agree with that statement?
Yes, I don't know necessarily so much with HTML, but yes, a lot of this is kind of riding the line with code. So I think back to Tina's little infographic she showed earlier, it's right on the border between screen flows and code itself. It's really easy to think of these as drag and drop Lightning Web components. So yes, it helps to have a more of a developer mindset in the sense of, hey, I know kind of what's happening behind the scenes, but it's same with me. I am not a strong coder. I am enough to be dangerous in very isolated incidents, but it helps kind of with that thought process. So yeah, you don't have to know how to write HTML from scratch, JavaScript from scratch, CSS, all of that stuff. But it does help to be able to just look at it and say, okay, I kind of understand what this is saying. Or I understand, if you're using an API, you kind of understand what an API is, and you're sending data to it and you're getting data back from it. Other than that, you don't have to know the intricate details, because like you mentioned, that stuff's all kind of built into the components itself.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Oops,
I will
wrong
say,
one.
just one more quick thing. I think it's relevant to that question. I have yet to write a line of code working with OmniStudio. It's all, as with anything Salesforce, you can always add on custom code to do whatever you need to, but there's so much out there that you can do with clicks. I know clicks not code is Salesforce's magical marketing line. There's so much stuff that you can do in OmniStudio that you don't ever need to write code for. So it is cool in that regard. So yeah, when you see the word developer, think of that more of the technical, how do I set this up, as opposed to like platform developer where you're looking and writing code, right? It's not that.
I heard that. It's very misleading. It's actually
Yes.
it's not a code certification.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Now this one is interesting because it's 75% passing, and then the consultant 63%.
I could tell you why.
So
Why? To give a background of consultant before I kind of give my 2 cents on both of them. So consultant, we talked about developer, which is how do I set this up? Consultant is a lot more of the business focus, right? It's you have this solution or this requirement. What pieces of OmniStudio would you use? So it's very use case centric. It's being able to understand what you have available in OmniStudio and kind of how you would fit those pieces together to solve that thing. That's really in a nutshell what it is. You're not going to get the technical, how do I extract data from Salesforce, or what kind of action would I use in an integration procedure? It's a lot more of, hey, this business wants to display customer information, and they also want to be able to, pull in the weather from that customer's location. How would you set that up, right? You would use a flex card and a OmniScript. So it's a lot more of those business centric cases. Now, why I think the exam score is lower. I struggled more on the consultant exam. I got a lower score than the developer because if you start diving into OmniStudio, it's really tough to get experience because there's not a whole lot of resources out there to practice with. So Salesforce does give some walkthroughs of example scenarios. They've got their dev orgs, things like that. But it's really tough for you to build up that, think of more of like a business analyst knowledge where you're interacting with clients and asking them these questions and getting these responses and then translating those to OmniStudio. There's not a whole lot out there to help you with that. So I struggled a lot because a big part of this exam is best fit, right? I think it's like 35% of the exam is you have a scenario. What pieces of OmniStudio work the best in that specific requirement, which if you're diving into these, it's really tough to gain that pre-knowledge. Developer is much easier in that regard because you don't care necessarily about the requirement. You care more about how to set those pieces up. So it's a lot easier to go into a dev org and play around with it. So my 2 cents, that would be, in my opinion, why this is a little bit lower. I thought the exam was just overall a bit harder. More so not from the content itself, but more so the questions that you're being asked and not being able to build up that prior knowledge to be able to respond to those questions. So if I had to do it again, I did take consultant first because I thought, oh, okay, typically in the Salesforce world, the consultant is kind of the more high level overview of so Service Cloud consultant, for example, Sales Cloud consultant. It's more of your high level, all right, I know how the big pieces of this function and I'm familiar with sales or I'm familiar with customer service or whatever that cloud is for. Opposite for this. I felt more comfortable with how to build these things and knowing the names of it and kind of what's available to me in OmniStudio versus the overall, how does OmniStudio fit into an org or requirement? So if I had to do it again, I would probably do developer first. But like I said, there's a lot of overlap. So in the consultant, you might get, hey, what are the best, if a person wants to display customer information, what would you use to display that? The answer would be a flex card. And then in the developer, it might be, okay, on a flex card, how do you launch an action from it, which you would launch an OmniScript, and kind of how do you set that up? So they tie together. There's quite a bit of overlap, but you're not going to get the same exact questions. They're testing 2 slightly different things.
Cool.
Any
Let's move on to
questions with any of the
resources.
certification stuff? I don't know how much, we have a couple minutes. I don't know if anyone has any burning questions about the certifications themselves. But there are some resources. So just quick on the resources while people are thinking of questions. There are trailheads for OmniStudio. Once you go into those, you'll see some call outs of basically, hey, we can't test. So for typical trailhead, you would be able to test on the fly, right? Click I can't even think of the word, but you basically submit your org to Salesforce. They check to make sure, that trailhead is complete. You can't do that with OmniStudio, but so you're kind of relying on, yep, I got the expected output. But there are trailheads. There is a take-home guide, which gives you basically a PDF of everything you need to know about OmniStudio, along with practice scenarios and use cases and step-by-step how to build them. Honestly, where I had the most help was obviously going through those trailheads, building things out, and then YouTube has so many good resources from people that I think are in the same boat of there's not a whole ton of, other people documenting their solutions in OmniStudio, but there's a ton of YouTube walkthroughs on, okay, how do I set up an edit block, which is an OmniStudio, OmniScript specific thing, or how do I configure XYZ? How do I set up a flex card, right? So there's a ton of great resources out there on YouTube, especially Apex Hours, that walks you through kind of step by step. There's like 35-part series that you can walk through, and they're very, very informative. Ton of information there.
Love Apex Hours.
Yes.
Who here plans to take their certification? I know I'm going to. I plan to do that. Anyone else planning on taking a certification anytime soon? What'd you find? What's the video that you just shared, Doug? Let me do that.
Theo, I found this was one of the videos that I found on YouTube preparing for the consultant exam. I'm in the nonprofit education industry, so with the cloud changes, OmniStudio is standard, so we had to scale up on it. So that's one of the videos that I've found useful, not having to, not previously touching OmniStudio. I felt a little bit more confident with the series of videos that he had. And then also, I'm a big fan of, I think his name is Dinesh Yadav, with all the exam preparations. So he had a nice series of information as well.
It's not.
Yes. What
was that name?
There we go.
I see him on
Doug,
LinkedIn
what
all
was
the
that
time.
name?
It was.
I'm gonna type it out.
That one. Just, I'm having problems with my computer. Guys, the worst thing in the world to have with consulting, because I'm back in the consulting world, I'm hopping from my employer's laptop to a virtual, and everything's fighting each other now. Sorry, my mind for the moment. So
no, but
there's,
I mean, that's a great point is from Doug's perspective, like there's a ton of people out there that create those YouTube series, which are super helpful. It's one thing looking at step-by-step in, a PDF of, hey, this is how you set up XYZ. It's another thing if you have someone who's experienced and knows what they're doing, walking through it and explaining the why behind it. So that definitely, painted some pictures for me at
I'll add
least.
that onto the slide deck when it gets ready to be published. Thank you, Doug. I'll have that in here and I'll include that in the resources as well. So thank you. All right, so that's our resources. There's not a lot of them. Doug, thank you again for the extra resources. Go on YouTube, do the hands-on, which Riley was saying, and then just realize, even though OmniStudio has been out there for a while, just by being acquired by Salesforce, it's still not that embraced. I think we're still in the very early stages of people really embracing it. You can really differentiate yourself, I really believe, by putting that as one of your banners of what you do and what you know. I think you can do well by yourself. All right, as usual, there's the health cloud resources, how to get a free demo org. Any other questions before we wrap up? Glad to have you, Ryan. So I'm excited. Normally we do not do anything during the summer, but July 12th we're making an exception. We're having gtpfy.com as guests, and we are going to be discussing GPT, AI, and healthcare. And we're going to be looking at that. I have a use case that I think would be brilliant for GPT, but how would we get it past the attorneys at the healthcare organization, and how can we build that trust? So right now it's all the buzzwords. Oh, we have a trust. When I was working at Ascension just 2 weeks ago, there was a group of very some people whose their job is to protect the company and not let technology in that could cause harm. So how do we get to that point that in the not only healthcare, but like in the financial world and things like that, how can we have this? So this is going to be talking about trust. I'm very excited. We have 2 Salesforce representations, 2 Salesforce employees, and along with GBTFY, look for more information on that. And then yes, summer break. And then September, we will be back. So very excited about that coming up. And as always, SFDC Health.com is our YouTube channel. Guide questions, you can reach out to me, you can reach out to the healthcare user group, and that is it. Thank you so much, guys, for being here. Really appreciate it. When this is on the YouTube channel by this weekend, I'll put out a being on LinkedIn as well as the email to group. Anything else before we say thank you and goodbye? No?
You're going to
Glad Ben, I'm
advertise
being
then
more
Thank you, guys.
the
accessible.
recording. You're going to advertise where the recording is.
Yeah,
Please,
I put it on
I have to miss the
the,
first part.
yeah, no, I advertise. So once it's actually put on YouTube, which is SFDC Help, I also put it on the Bevy screen, and then I'll email out everyone who's on the healthcare user group, Trailhead group. If you're there, I'll put it out on email that it's been posted.
Thank you. This is awesome.
So Riley, thank you again. I mean, it's always great to work with you. Thank you for taking time to share this.
Thanks for the invite. It's always a blast. I know, as you said, we can talk for hours and hours and hours about it. So
We
it is a
can.
rabbit hole.
Until next time, guys. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a good one. Bye.
See ya.